Hello everyone, this is Musique and I am back with another edition of Simmering Successes, and before we even get into the content of the video, I'm going to talk about my definition of a simmering success. So this is an album that is successful, or at least on paper successful, but when you look at the infrastructure of the album era and rollout, you see a lot of holes and flaws that would eventually cause either their career decline or affect their next album, which would be deemed a flop essentially. But the issue started with this era. With eras like this, it usually starts out well, but then peters out relatively quickly, and it doesn't compare to their peak moments. So it's successful, but there's a lot of issues with it that kind of was the beginning of the end in a lot of ways. So, if you haven't looked at the title of the video, which is ridiculous, I'm going to be covering Brandy's Full Moon today. And this is an album that's interesting to me in a few ways. One is that it's the prototypical teenage to adult transitional album, but unlike many others in the past and even some in the future, the grounds for success was there, and you do see it in some of the single performances and the album peak. But due to a few outside influences, it caused it to not do as well as they hoped, and it really derailed Brandy's career, where she was never really seen as a successful adult artist due to it. And there's another conversation about pregnancy and how the industry handles that, which needs to be discussed very in depth in this video. So let's get to it. Being a teen star is always a double-edged sword. You make a lot of money at a young age, more than most people make in a lifetime, and you have a fully established career before most kids even graduate high school. At the same time, this massive success puts you in a box, especially when it comes to image, when your frontal lobe has not even fully developed yet, and you aren't sure of yourself as a grown individual. Brandy was seen as a black princess, not just because she played Cinderella, but due to her wholesome image. Her Never Say Never era was a huge era for her in the late 1990s, coming off 2 #1 hits and an additional top 20 hits and some other radio staples, adding up to a 5 times platinum album and estimated sales of 16 million worldwide. But the pressure from constant promoting, performing, and acting in stuff like I Know What You Did Last Summer, Double Platinum, and Moesha, in addition to Cinderella, caused for a meltdown/breakdown in November 1999. This actually happened while she was filming Moesha, causing her to scale back completely. There were discussions and talks about a third album to obviously replicate the success of her last album and to continue her career, but that would not come for a while. On to the development of the album. Brandy was nervous and apprehensive when the initial discussions and talks about a third album came to be, as she was worried that it would not live up to the success of her previous albums, hence going on a hiatus to reflect and introspect and to be inspired. She would slowly start working on the album in mid-2000 while contributing to soundtracks, with one song, Another Day in Paradise, with her brother, would be a huge smash in Europe. Also, her voice changed when it got lower, deeper, warmer, and a more textured lower register, with a stronger head voice. Conceptualizing the album would start around late 2000 with Atlantic Records, and she reunited with Ronnie Jerkins and his Darkchild crew, who had a heavy hand in her last album. Brandy wanted to be more heads-on with the project, so she met up with writers and producers and talked about her life, so it could be incorporated within the songs of the album, especially with what has happened to her in the last 3 years. Full Moon was conceptualized as a concept album about the development of a male-female relationship, and named it Full Moon as a full circle moment for what happened in her life over the last 3 years.
When people go out and buy your record today, and it's been quite some time, as you already said, and they put it in their CD player or they're driving home, give me like a couple of things that you want them to take from this record?
Love, basically. The album is basically about love and just relating to the things that go on within you, like your emotions. It's a very emotional album. It's my most personal album, so I think everybody should go out and get that album. Full Moon is a very personal album for me. It reflects my life in the last 3 years, and it best represents my experiences. And I had a great time doing this album. It took about 2 years to record. And I'm happy. I'm happy that it's done and complete now that I can get out and promote it the way I want to now.
All right. So you have been away for 3 years. What happened during these 3 years? What have you done?
Well, in the last 3 years, I decided to move out of my parents' house, move on my own, accept some responsibility, also making my own decisions and choices in life. And I found out a lot about myself that I didn't know before. And the last 2 years, I started to work on the album.
What did you become aware of during these 3 years?
That love is within, and just so many different things about myself that's just for me to know.
All right. Okay. So you worked again with Rodney Jerkins,
Yes.
this massive producer. Yes. How was it?
I love working with Rodney Jerkins. He understands me musically. He allows me to express myself whatever way I want to. I have so much creative control working with him. We both have very strong opinions, so we kind of bump heads sometimes, but our musical relationship is incredible. And I think he does his best work with me, and I do my best work with him.
So, the new CD is out?
Yes.
Yeah, whole new sound for you, isn't it?
Different sound, very sexy, mature, edgy.
Edgy, I like edgy. Edgy's good.
Grown-up friend.
Yeah, Full Moon. Well, all right, fine. We're anxious to hear it. You're going to sing for us, right?
My last album was 3 years ago. The new album, it just represents an edgier feel. You know, it's more sexy, more mature. I've grown a lot more vocally. It's just more about me and who I've been for the past 3 years.
Sometimes life imitates art, as she got involved with producer Robert Big Bird Smith, who is a cousin of Rodney Jerkins, as they worked on the album and developed something of their own. We will get there. It was also noted that she and Rodney Jerkins were inspired by Aaliyah and Timbaland at the time. The album was originally scheduled to be released on November 20th, 2001, but it ended up being pushed back to March of 2002. So, with these type of videos, I like to talk about the label and where they were during the development and promotion of the era. So, during the production and release of the era, there's a lot of restructuring that was taking place at Atlantic, where many of the people that were a part of Brandy's initial team have either left or were in the process of leaving soon. But this would not culminate completely until her next era, but it is important to mention here. Atlantic Records were starting to prioritize hip-hop crossover artists, young teen acts, and more rap-leaning R&B artists, and Brandy did not fit into any of those, as she wanted to be more experimental in her music, and she wasn't focusing on the business element of it. The label obviously knew that she was not a teenager anymore and was in her early to mid-20s, in addition to all other venues that she would use to promote her music did not apply to her anymore, since she wasn't a teenager anymore, and some of those kid-friendly channels weren't applicable to someone who was in their early to mid-20s. And some of those venues just were cancelled by this point in time. In addition to that, Moesha was cancelled not long before she started working on the album, so the visibility that she had from constantly being on TV was not there anymore either, where even when she wasn't doing anything like project-wise and music-wise, she was still on TV via Moesha, but that wasn't an option anymore. They also had to keep her as America's wholesome sweetheart, but to introduce more futuristic visuals, more sensual and sexual themes, and darker production. When she got quote-unquote married and then pregnant, it was another layer that they had to consider regarding Brandy's adult image. Obviously, let's talk about the marriage now, because the label had to pretty much switch how they were going to promote the era, since some of the earlier pictures were going to be sexier and sensual to start that I'm a grown woman narrative, but they had to pivot to the marriage and pregnancy and the family narrative, and this involved a lot of cushioning from the press.
Be excited about in your life. You got married fairly recently.
Yes.
Can you tell us something about what's the guy like?
He's a dime.
He's a dime.
Yeah, you know what that is?
I have no idea.
Yes,
Look at me.
You do. It's a 10.
Oh, a dime is a 10.
Yeah.
I've been called a nickel. Yeah. I thought that was a compliment, and then I heard there's a dime. Now you're pregnant. When are you due?
I'm due early July.
Early July. That's
Can
so
you tell?
exciting. Yeah, I couldn't really tell. You look great. It's a beautiful
Thank you very
dress.
much. Thank
Yeah.
you.
This is. Do you know yet if it's a boy?
It's a girl.
I'm worn out just saying all of that stuff. Hello, sweetness.
Good morning.
Always a
How are
pleasure
you?
to see you.
Thank you.
Last time I looked, you're Cinderella. Now I look and you're married.
Yes.
And you're expecting a little baby. Who is he? And how'd you go about getting married?
His name is Robert, and he's a producer and a songwriter, and I'm very happy with him. And we secretly married last summer, so.
And why did you elope? Because I know your family, y'all are tight.
Yeah, I plan to have a big wedding, but I just wanted it to be between him and I in the beginning.
Can I only show somebody this? Can we get a shot of this? Don't hurt yourself, everybody, if I'm looking at this. Can you look at that? There's a lot of love on that finger right there. Tell me about the baby. When's the baby due?
July.
Let me just say, you look like $1 million. I mean, with child, you wear it so well.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations on the record. I know you're thrilled about that.
I'm so excited about it. I'm a little nervous, but I'm very excited.
What are you nervous about?
I'm nervous because I haven't been out since, I don't know when, 3 years ago. Yeah.
But what about us, which you're going to do a special version for us today? The first single has already done so well. That's got to make you feel good.
It does. It makes me feel very good and makes the nervousness go away a little bit.
Right.
But not much.
Well, listen, we're having in honor of you and all this activity ever since you sort of resurfaced.
Okay.
Has come out all these rumors and everything. Let's take them down one by one. We're playing a little rumor mill game. We'll get to that in a second.
All
Let's
right.
start with your marriage. When did you actually get married?
Last summer. I can't give you a date or time.
That's okay. That's fine.
Yeah, keeping that kind of private.
It already happened, so no one's going to get a helicopter anymore.
Okay.
And then why? Why were you so secretive about the marriage?
I just took advantage of my privacy at that time. No one was really interested in what I was doing because I was just doing the album. So I just took advantage of my private life, my normal time.
How long did nobody know you were married?
About a couple months ago.
So that's crazy.
So that's
How do you keep a
5
secret
months.
like that? And was it weird?
It was very weird, but it was kind of fun because everybody was speculating and
Right.
wanting to know, and I was like, I don't know, maybe.
Did your close inner circle, like your parents, know?
My parents knew.
Oh, that's good. Okay, good.
His parents knew too.
And you are, and then you came on and said that you were pregnant with child, which is fantastic. Congratulations.
Can you see a little bit of it?
Yeah, can I see? Look at that.
Can you see?
Hold on, she's singing.
Aww.
You know, I can tell just by looking, it's a girl.
Yeah, it is a girl.
It is? You already know?
It is.
Wow, that's right. Thank you very much.
Carson, everybody.
Thank you. If anybody else is knocked up, I'll be in the back for $5. I'll guess the sex of your child. So now, why did you, that's always something interesting. A lot of parents don't want to know.
Parents don't want to know
The sex of the child,
Yeah,
of course.
yeah.
But you got like rooms to make and things to plan, right?
That's right. I want to do like a nursery and things like that and build it all around the girl characters.
Right.
The speed with which our relationship evolved sparked a wildfire of speculation. Critics and fans alike seemed to forget there was music to discuss. Instead, interviews became interrogations, not about the songs I'd poured my soul into, but about why I'd kept my relationship so close to my chest. The last time I looked, you were Cinderella, a morning show host said, leaning forward with barely concealed judgment. And now we're expecting a baby. His tone dripped with incredulity, as if the woman sitting before him, no longer the wide-eyed teenager America had fallen in love with, was some imposter who committed a cardinal sin by growing up. Almost every interview followed this script. Carson Daly's boyish smile did nothing to soften the inquisition on TRL. Teens in the background held signs with my name while he dissected my personal life. We're playing a little rumor mill game, he said. Too casual, too scripted. When did you actually get married? Why were you so secretive? The studio audience leaned forward, hungry for gossip. I smiled through clenched teeth, feeling the foundation of my privacy crumbling brick by brick.
Everyone on Atlantic had faith in her still, but they now knew that they only had really 3 to 4 months at the most to promote the project due to her pregnancy, and they initially expected the album to do quote-unquote never say never numbers in production, but they had to lower their expectations due to the pregnancy. Despite the gap being the same between her first 2 projects and her second to third eras, there is more silence on this gap, so there was a focus on trying to recapture the momentum with everything that was mentioned here. And like I mentioned earlier, the pregnancy was now a marketing element that is part of the promotion of the album. So now it is time to go into the actual rollout of the album. What About Us was released as the lead single of the album on New Year's Day, so January 1st, 2002, and it is an electro-funk song that talked about a love that turned out not to be true, or the relationship was more unreciprocated than she thought. There's definitely a lot of UK garage influences in the song as well. It is an aggressive, offbeat, edgy song and kind of a sexier song with a sexier sound, and they wanted to do a song that had a sound that was not in the industry at the time, and I think that's why the European influences came in, and the team wanted something completely new. It was apparently one of the later songs done on the album, with Rodney Jerkins working on it when the album was getting ready to be finished. The song was a worldwide smash, as it charted very high in several countries, within the top 10 in most of the countries that it was in, and the others that it didn't make it to the top 10, it made it into the top 20. Where the song ended up peaking at number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts during the week of March 16th, 2002, with it being her last top 10 to date on that chart. It also peaked at number 3 on the R&B charts. The song had a lot of support from MTV and BET, where it did well on both platforms, with the reviews being slightly mixed, as a few critics thought that it was very clunky and annoying, especially with the production, while the others praised the edginess and revamping Brandy's image and sound. But ultimately, the song did what it needed to do as a lead single, reintroducing an adult Brandy into the 2000s climate, and it was very successful, adding to the anticipation of the album. The video was recorded at the tail end of November, and either she didn't know she was pregnant at the time, or they just found out that she was pregnant, and you could even tell by the look of the video and the early images, it wasn't pregnancy focused yet. Also, the song was released through a new streaming platform that they were doing through the AOL service First Listen, and it was huge there. So I just want to add that little tidbit. The album Full Moon was released on February 20th, 2002, at least in Europe and Asia, but it was officially released on March 5th, 2002 in North America, where it debuted and peaked at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 200 charts with $156,000 sold. The album was certified platinum about a month after release, so around April 5th, 2002, where projected album sales after all that is said and done is at roughly 1.1 million in the United States, where it did spend 30 weeks on the chart. It didn't do as well internationally, where it only got certified gold in Canada, the United Kingdom, and Japan, and it wasn't certified anywhere else. So, in general, the album was definitely seen as an underperformance, but they knew that they didn't have much time to promote the album. But clearly, they wanted Never Say Never numbers, and that didn't happen for a plethora of reasons that we are eventually going to get into. When it comes to the critical reception, it received mixed reviews. I'm specifically talking about the reviews during 2002. Many complained about the length of the album, i.e. it being too long, and also found her attempt to be sexy to be off, and they did expect the album to be more like What About Us, where people did like the maturity, edginess, and probably felt like the album was the most album-failed album in her catalog, where she successfully claimed womanhood. Also, the production was definitely seen as a mixed bag, where others liked the more European garage sound mixed with the R&B and the Y2K sound, while others found the production to be way too clunky, obnoxious, and quite frankly distracting. Full Moon was released as the second single of the album on April 1st, 2002. It is a pop and R&B song about meeting someone and falling in love with them at the first sight, to the point where you want to immediately get with them. The amount of vocal layering used on this song specifically is why Brandy is now called the Vocal Bible. The song is one of the few that was not done by Rodney Jerkins, but Mike City, and Atlantic initially did not want the song on the album, since it wasn't done by the main producer who had name recognition at this point. But Brandy intentionally named the album after the song, forcing it to be on the album, and she really pushed for this to be a single, especially the second single. So, the song peaked at number 18 on the Billboard Hot 100 during the week of July 6, 2002, charted at number 16 on the R&B charts, and charted in mediocre placements overseas. So it wasn't a worldwide smash like What About Us was, though you could blame it on the fact that the promotion for the era had slowed down by that point. So, by the time the single was released, Brandy was in her final trimester regarding her pregnancy and was not actively promoting the album like she was, or the single like she was during the last single, causing for a promotion to be a bit more muted, and the song peaked shortly after she gave birth. Critically, the song received widespread acclaim all around, calling it catchy, hypnotic, and mentioning that it's the standout track of the album. While Full Moon, the single, was in circulation, Brandy and her team collaborated with MTV to create a reality show documenting her pregnancy journey, ultimately culminating in the birth of her daughter. The time span between filming and airing was extremely short, as she gave birth in June. So they recorded the last month or two of her pregnancy, and the show aired from June 18 to July 9th, 2002. So apparently she discussed the choices of the singles for the album and how the era kind of started wrapping up, and this was also used as kind of the final route to promote the album, where the choice of the third single was discussed, where she did not like the single choice. He Is was released as the third and final single of the album on July 29, 2002. It was sent to Urban Contemporary Radio on that date, but it was sent to Rhythmic Contemporary Radio on September. The producer and writer, Warren Campbell, really wanted Brandy to record a gospel album/song for some reason. She rejected the request. This was a while ago, despite being religious and spiritual. They got together to do another song, and the lyrics of the song was about an everlasting love, where she thought it was about giving birth, but the producer revealed it to the press that it's really about God. This entire situation is just kind of weird, to be honest. Anyways, the critics were somewhat lukewarm on the song and somewhat positive of it as well, but many questioned why it was made a single. I already mentioned that Brandy didn't even want it to be a single. The song outright flopped, where it only got to 72 on the R&B charts and didn't chart anywhere else, but the era was essentially done before the song was even released, and there was no promotion whatsoever. I don't even think the album was in the top 100 by the time the single was released. So now we're at the portion of the video where I discuss the post-era aftermath. This usually discusses the immediate post-era aftermath, so from this era to the next era, but there's some elements that talk about the distant post-era aftermath that's more long form or long term. One thing that happened in the immediate aftermath of the era is that it made Brandy rush into doing her next album. If you look at her catalog, there's generally a 4-year gap between her albums, and there's more time than that between her last 2 studio albums as I'm recording this. The gap between Full Moon and her next album, Aphrodisiac, was only 2 years, and that was extremely short for her. And she started working on it in late 2002, where it was released in 2004. It actually had a release date of mid-2003, so a year after Full Moon was released, but obviously there are some delays. But even with the delays, this is her shortest gap between albums. I think the reason why she did this is because there was a taste of mainstream success with the Full Moon album, but it was fleeting and she only had a few months to promote it, and the planned tour in the fall never happened. Yes, there is supposed to be a tour for this album, but it got cancelled. Literally weeks after giving birth, Brandy got into the studio to record her 4th album with her boyfriend and Mike the City, the producer of Full Moon, the song, which was still peaking while she was in the studio. And this was despite her initially intending to tour for Full Moon in the fall.
But now you've got a big world tour coming up, right?
Yes, maybe in September or October. I would love to tour.
And the baby is due in, what, 3 months?
July.
So it looks like you and the baby will be together on this tour.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Are you going to tour with this album?
I would love to tour maybe sometime in September or October. Yeah.
So you're going to wait. You're going to have the baby and then tour. That
spend a lot
probably
of
makes
time
sense.
Yeah, it does.
It'd be funny if you were doing a giant concert and then you're like, wait a minute, we got to stop here.
My water broke.
It's baby time.
I know.
The whole audience drives you to the hospital. No, this is a much better idea.
She had a fallout with Darkchild for supposedly giving their sound to other artists, hence the change in producers, but this collaboration would not end well, and even when they did reunite for Human, it didn't end well, and the relationship is just permanently severed. This was supposed to be her grown woman era, and she was supposed to promote the hell out of it, and she didn't have that with Full Moon. Another thing that happened is that her personal life and her image clashed very hard. You kind of saw some of that culminating with this era, but it got so much worse with her next era. We now know that she lied about being married during the Full Moon era because she had to preserve her quote-unquote good girl image, despite being in her early to mid-20s in Full Moon, and people having children out of wedlock was becoming more normalized. What made it even worse was that her ex-boyfriend, they broke up in 2003, hence him and Mike City not being a part of what would eventually become Aphrodisiac, was the one who aired it out on the Wendy Williams radio show, and it brought so much backlash. It caused everyone to look at her entire image and career over the last decade at the point, and it came to the conclusion that it was fake. Her personal life was messier than what people thought, and it contrasted with her image, where she even lost endorsements, including CoverGirl during this period. Everything, at least image-wise, that she and her mother had built for a decade was slashed, and she had to become a more authentic version of herself when she dealt with the public.
I think the last time you were on the Oprah show, you told me a little fib, did you not?
It wasn't a little fib.
It was a big fib.
It was a big fib.
It was a big fib. Brandy is now all grown up, 23. As you can see, she is grown, and we recently learned that she got married and she's married now.
Yes.
And is expecting a baby girl this summer. I know. You have a shot of this, just the tiniest little belly showing.
Yeah.
But it's actually, what, 6 months?
6 months.
Yeah. I asked you if you were married at the time, and you said you were.
I said that I was
And
married.
why did you say that?
Because, at that time, being pregnant out of wedlock was not a trend. It was not something that people praised. It was a sin.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I could not be honest about that. I felt the pressure of...
It's okay.
Okay. I felt the pressure of, again, having to be perfect. And I was scared. I thought that everything that I had worked hard for and everything that I worked to build, the image that I worked so hard to build, was threatened. And I felt like having a child out of wedlock
would ruin that.
Ruin my career, everything that I built.
Yeah.
And I'm really sorry for that, because I mean, you just don't lie to Oprah. Okay.
And I believed you. I believed you because I just believed you.
My phone vibrated against the nightstand, jolting me back to reality. My publicist's name flashed across the screen, a visual alarm that the crisis had only begun. We had crafted a lie about being legally married, and now I realized I had built myself on a foundation of calculated moves, a house of cards that now collapsed in spectacular public fashion. And the betrayal cut deep. Before our daughter entered the world, we'd made a commitment to protect one another no matter what. If I could have dissolved into the hotel carpet, vanished into thin air, I would have. But reality anchored me. I had Sarah waiting at home, music to promote, a career still worth salvaging. I was still standing, still breathing, still here. A mantra I repeated silently as reporters began circling like vultures, eager to pick apart the carcass of my credibility. My dishonesty had sprouted from terror, pure and simple. I'd known nothing but the suffocating pressure to maintain the spotless image of America's teenage sweetheart. Even as I crossed the threshold into my 20s, I carried the weight of that crown. I was paralyzed by the potential judgment I might face having a child outside of marriage. But by lying, I had only made things worse. When I finally confessed, the professional consequences were swift and merciless. CoverGirl, whose fresh-faced campaigns had featured my smile for years, severed ties without ceremony. Other endorsements followed, dominoes falling in quick succession. I tried to insulate myself from the noise, focusing instead on the perfect curve of my daughter's cheek, the miracle of her tiny fingernails, the way she smelled after a bath, talcum powder, and infinite possibility. They don't matter, my mother said fiercely, one night as I sobbed in her kitchen away from Sarah's innocent eyes. You and that baby, that's what matters. The rest is just noise. But even as I nodded through tears, I could feel the weight of it. I was a new mother, navigating the greatest love and responsibility I'd ever known, while simultaneously watching my career implode. And that reality filled me with a sadness so profound it bordered on spiritual. I have paid incalculable costs for that single decision. The judgment I fled from found me anyway, raising questions that haunt me still. What if I had embraced honesty from the beginning? How much of the backlash stemmed from my pregnancy outside marriage, and how much from the deception itself? After years crafting an immaculate public image, I'm certain the reaction would have been severe had I told the truth initially, and my child would have suffered in the crossfire of public opinion. Yet ultimately, I met the same fate anyway. Perhaps the lie amplified the fallout, but before the truth emerged, I believed with a mother's fierce conviction that I was protecting what mattered most, my baby.
Due to Full Moon not being a blockbuster album and Atlantic seeing it as an underperformance, her relationship with her label weakened more and more. Due to them seeing the album as an underperformance, with that came a loss of mainstream momentum, since the era ended on a borderline non-existent whimper. What comes with that is that the anticipation for Aphrodisiac was a lot lower, and the label knew this. When you come off an album that is seen as an underperformance, you lose control and influence over the project, at least regarding the label and A&R, and there's a lot more executive meddling that takes place, so that they can change the narrative and make the momentum go on an uprising instead of a decline. What happened is that at the last minute, once the Aphrodisiac album was pretty much complete, Atlantic decided, in an attempt to get Kanye to sign to them, they gave him access to produce 2 songs for the album without her permission first. One of them would be the lead single, and he could create the treatment for that lead single, pissing off her and Timbaland off, who distanced himself from the project. I'm referring to Timbaland. Things got so bad between Brandy and Atlantic that she asked to be released from her contract a few months after Aphrodisiac, and they didn't fight to keep her.
The reality of being a major label recording artist is that you deliver hits. Today, Full Moon is revered as a seminal album. It's regarded as the blueprint of modern R&B, and I have profound gratitude for that recognition. Back then, however, the story read differently. The album wasn't a multi-platinum sensation like my first 2 albums. Because of that, the label executives didn't mince words about needing to come back swinging, with guaranteed hits, not artistic evolution. One evening, my phone lit up with a call from a high-level executive at the label, one I trusted implicitly. "Hey, so we were thinking." His voice oozed false casualness. "What if you did a few records with Kanye West?" Kanye? I hesitated, the name feeling foreign in the context of my project. "I don't know." "He's blowing up right now," he continued, not waiting for me to finish my thought. "The work he did with Alicia Keys was incredible. You don't know my name? Come on." I sighed. "I know he's hot, but this is my project with Timbaland. I don't want to break that flow." "Brandy, we need a slam dunk out the gate. Kanye is a guaranteed slam dunk." There it was, not a suggestion, a decree wrapped in the thin disguise of collaborative decision-making. This is the thing people don't understand about being an artist. Regardless of how many hits, accolades, or awards you've accumulated, working with a major label sometimes means wrestling with opposing visions. The artist may want one thing and the executives another, and that tug of war doesn't always end in the artist's favor, given how much power the label wields. The dust had barely settled when I discovered the truth. The label was hoping to court Kanye to come to Atlantic. Without consulting me, they had offered Kanye 2 placements on my album, with the added condition that one of his records would be the lead single. They would also give him free rein to create the video treatment for that single. We worked on 2 records, Talk About Our Love, which ended up as the lead single, and Where You Wanna Be. In the end, the compromise was for naught. The Kanye record didn't turn out to be the guaranteed chart topper the label had banked on, and none of the singles with Timbaland could gain traction after that. It was like watching a beautiful ship sink before it ever really left the harbor, the weight of expectations and miscalculations dragging it down to the ocean floor. Released June 25th, 2004, Aphrodisiac became my most critically lauded album. But acclaim and commercial performance are 2 different currencies, and the label deemed it a flop. I had poured my whole self into creating something classic with a producer I deeply admired. We had crafted an innovative body of work filled with progressive, experimental R&B that pushed boundaries and broke new ground. But because it didn't move units in the expected numbers, none of that artistic achievement seemed to matter. In the spirit of starting fresh, I made a decision that terrified me. Atlantic had been my label for 11 years, the only professional home my music had ever known. But it was time for me to move on. I asked to be released from my contract. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it was necessary. Like leaving a house you've outgrown, but still love deeply. Every corner filled with memories, both beautiful and painful. I knew if I was going to continue in this industry without losing myself completely, it was time for a change. Time to find a new place where my voice, both literal and figurative, could truly be heard.
And the final element when it comes to the post-album aftermath is that I feel like there was a huge sense of desperation, especially regarding the aphrodisiac era, but you would somewhat see it in the next few eras with how obsessed she was with commercial success, since Full Moon was not able to fully catapult her into being a hugely successful adult artist, and that transition didn't really land well due to it being cut short. So with all of this, there was a lot of changes within her team that started happening, especially during the aphrodisiac era. Her mother stepped back as a manager, and then she worked with a manager named Benny Medina, who was responsible for that horrid album magazine cover shoot in 2004, and things did not work out well with him regarding management, and the album was released a few weeks after that happened. So she essentially switched managers back to her mother a few weeks before the album even was released. But a lot of things that were set up for it to be released afterwards were already set up by Benny Medina, like the magazine shoot that I already mentioned. And I mentioned briefly, but we saw the change in producers many times, especially during the making of her fourth album. Falling out with Rodney Jerkins, then falling out with her child's father and Mike City, who were close, then working with Timbaland, only for Atlantic to send back him last minute for Kanye West, and ultimately none of that really worked. And some of the damage here, especially with the changing managers and the changing collaborators, affected her long after Aphrodisiac too. Aphrodisiac was supposed to be her sexy grown woman era, especially with Full Moon was supposed to somewhat do that, but because of its short run and the pregnancy pivots, they couldn't do that, and it just came off as a lot more desperate when it came time to do it for Aphrodisiac, especially with all the other chaos that was happening in her life and career at the time. So now we're in the what happened section of the video, and this is me just basing my personal opinions on what happened during the Full Moon era. So I think the main thing that happened is that Brandy suffered from the teen artist curse. When you make it big as a teenager, you have this curated, innocent image where you build a very young audience that's on average younger than you as a teenager, but you grow at a different rate than your audience. It is very hard for people, even older people, to see you as anything different, even when you grow out of it, and there's so much pressure to maintain this innocent, child-friendly image. When you inevitably grow out of that image just due to age and growing out of being a teenager into an adult, it is generally a rough transition for most artists, and many don't age out of it and transition well. Brandy and her team knew about this, and I think the reason why she went with the marriage route was so she could remain a good role model. But to who? The youthful audience that she gained. She didn't get to do her full grown woman transition with this album, and it was cut short. So the transition was not done very well. And then when you add the layer of race to it and being seen as a role model for black girls who can't screw up, culminates in a lot of this, especially when there's a lot of bad role models and examples for black women, specifically and black girls, as the media likes to push these trashy narratives and images for black girls and women to look at too. So Brandy was seen as the alternative, so she and her team felt so much pressure to keep that up. Another major thing that happened with this era is that she mixed business with pleasure. While working on the album, she got with one of the producers of the album, Robert Smith, which started around mid-2001, and right when she recorded What About Us, the video, in December, that was around the time she found out that she's pregnant, right as they were launching the era. Then the era had to be managed around their loving relationship / their loving quote-unquote marriage, which then led to the reality show, and it was all false, especially with what came out only 2 years later. She went from being a teenage icon to being a married mother within an album release, and I think that just turned a lot of the fanbase and the general public off, since 23 was still and is still very young, and it was just a shift. A lot of the interviews of the era, and I'm pretty sure you saw some of them sprinted out throughout this video, had the same confusion as well. Where the last time they saw her, she was Cinderella, and she was a teen artist, and now she's a married mother. So there's a conversation about how the industry handles pregnancy that needs to be delved into. Whenever a woman is pregnant, the industry sees it as the worst thing ever, and they use it as an excuse to underpromote an album era before it even gets started. While they did launch the era at first, and gave her promotion for about the first 2 months or so, they still cut it prematurely. Brandy wanted to tour, and she wanted a different third single, but Atlantic cut it short, and then acted like the underperformance was her fault, when they cut the era shorter than she wanted it to, and even shorter than the general public wanted it to. Some of it was a lack of faith in their era, and others felt like the pregnancy was not a good look, so ending the era early was their way out of avoiding the elephant in the room. This happened to several women before and after this era, and I really think that it was Cardi B in the late 2010s that changed the trajectory and the stigma around pregnant women artists during album eras, and she did it with both of her albums, where record labels can see that you can still work album eras to their fullest extent with pregnant women even after they give birth, but Brandy was not given that chance, obviously. Another layer that might be more minor is that it is a bit more experimental compared to what was hot on the radio at the time, and based on her past eras. What About Us was a hit, but there were a lot of complaints about the production at the time, and this complaint went through the entire album. At this time, a lot of the vocal layering that Brandy did, especially on the song Full Moon, was not as appreciated in 2002 as it is in the modern day, over 20 years later, so that may have also turned people off. Now we're in the final section of how to fix the error that I do for all of these videos. So the first thing that I would do is keep the original release date of the album, which was November 20th, 2001. It didn't seem like they needed to do much updates anyways, and she either would have just gotten pregnant or didn't realize it. So it gives the album a few months to be promoted and pushed, and it could give more singles to be released during that time. Regarding the singles release, I would keep the single choices, or at least the first 2 singles, so those would be the same, but with this new timeline, things would be moved up. So What About Us would be released in October 2001 instead of January 2002. Full Moon would be released in January 2002 instead of April 2002. Moving it up a few months would give the album more momentum in Europe, especially after Another Day in Paradise did well over there, so there'd be less of a gap between Another Day in Paradise and What About Us, so that European audience would still be interested in the era, and it would be tighter. Would still do the reality show, but it would be around what the third single is, and it would introduce the fourth single, just like how in real life it was around the time the second single was released, and then it kind of introduced the third single. I wouldn't push the whole marriage angle, really. I think they should have just pushed lifelong partners instead of saying that they were married. So what happened in the next era could have been avoided. So for the third single, I would make it When You Touch Me, so she could do an easy performance during the few times that she would be able to before going into bed rest and into labor, and it could carry through the summer, kind of like Full Moon did when it peaked in the real life version. And then once she is able to recover from maternity leave, one of the singles, I Thought or All in Me, could have been released or could be released in the fall. I'm thinking of All in Me because it's a bit more commercial and a bit more easier on radio compared to I Thought. Anyways, both have strong hooks and have more R&B pop crossover with broader appeal. It would only have to be one of them, since I do think that this sound or the sound that the album had, was getting dated by the time 2003 came around. And this is the Y2K-ish sound, especially in the United States. And then for touring, I would do a relatively limited tour in late 2002, which would then carry into early 2003. So I'll do mainly a North American tour, and then some of the spots in early 2003 could be for Europe and Asia. Not a whole lot though. I don't know the size of it, so like arenas or whatever, I'm not really focused on that. But it would be more limited dates in Europe, since you wouldn't want to drive things out for too long, since in this timeline the era starts in late 2001, and then she would have time to work on her next album. While this is happening, the final single could make its run, so she could promote the single and the tour during her last round of talk show appearances in the era. It would be around September or October where it would start, like it was intended to in real life. I do think if the appropriate changes were made, the album could have done 2 to 3 times platinum in the States and an additional 3 million overseas, adding up to 5 to 6 million worldwide. And depending on how well the tour and fourth single went, a final single could have potentially been released in early 2003 to wrap up the era. And it would have set her up for Aphrodisiac a lot better. She would be a successful adult artist. She wouldn't have to feel the need to upkeep this picture perfect image, and she could show that she could do it all while being a mother. And that concludes my video on Full Moon. This album and era always interested me, and breaking it down really showed a lot of the issues that happened with it, and it showed the tried and true struggle transformation of being a teen artist to being an adult artist. But it wasn't like this album flopped or there wasn't any sort of interest. That wasn't the case at all. And this album also caused me to talk about pregnancy and how it's handled in the music industry. Anyways, the next video involves someone that Brandy is very, very, very tied to, including the Grammy, and I think that should just say it all.